What's up everybody, Pazu here with my first ever Genshin Impact video. I thought I'd try my hand at one of these and maybe do a couple more in the future, we'll see how it goes. But for my first video here, I thought I'd talk about a topic that's close and dear to my heart, which is Dehya. Because she's one of my favorite characters in the game. While I do agree that she's not an amazing character, I don't exactly agree with everything that's being said about her, and so I thought I'd make this video. There is going to be maybe a tiny amount of copium huffing involved in the making of this video, but not too much honestly. And full disclosure, I do have Dehya at Constellation 2, which is kind of significant. It is a little bit of a damage increase. C1 really doesn't matter too much. I mean it does, but it doesn't provide any additional damage. It's a quality of life improvement that matters more or less depending on what team you run her in. This right here, C2, is a little bit of a damage increase, but not too much honestly. I reckon if you had a better weapon than I had on Dehya, you could probably make up a similar difference. I do have relatively decent artifacts, but they're not perfect. You can go through them here real quickly. This is a good piece, this is a good piece, this is a really good piece. This is only just an okay piece to be honest, and this one isn't too great either. So these last two pieces, you know, if you had better pieces here than me, you could probably make up the difference that C2 does. So this is still a somewhat relatable Dehya with a 4-star weapon. The reason I want to make this video is because people really exaggerate how bad Dehya is. First of all, I don't think she's bad at all, to be honest. Even at C0, I do think she's an okay unit. But at C2, I think she's actually a good unit. We're gonna have to compare her to my girl Hu Tao here a little bit. I do have a decently invested Hu Tao. Nothing too crazy. I do like Hu Tao. And I do think she's an overall stronger character than Dehya, right? I have to make this very clear from the get-go. But the reason Dehya, I think, is underrated is because people focus too much on her damage. You know, her E doesn't do a ton of damage because, I mean, the numbers are nice, but it ticks pretty slowly. And then her burst, the numbers, I agree, are a little bit disappointing. Unless you maybe play her in the ideal vape team, which I have going right here, and we'll talk about that later. But the thing is, right, when people compare Hu Tao and Dehya, they focus on the damage, which is fair in, you know, in one regard, because damage is all Hu Tao does, right? But Dehya does a lot more than just damage. She provides interruption resistance. She reduces the whole team's damage by up to 50% for the A tier at level 9, and she is able to do off-field damage as well while she's not on the field, and trigger Burgeon decently well. She's one of 2 characters in the game that function well with Burgeon, so that is something to consider as well. But let's talk about the role consolidation, right? The fact that she's able to deal damage on-field and off-field, provide interruption resistance, and damage reduction. And on that front, we have to talk about my man Zhongli right here. Because the thing is, when we talk about offense, people say just run Hu Tao, she does more damage. Fair enough. But then Dehya also does damage reduction, right? And then people say, well, just run Zhongli. Zhongli's shield is pretty damn strong. It's the strongest shield in the game, and for most instances in the game, it's going to be a more comfortable defensive option than DSE, right? Because Zhongli, if you put his shield up, he provides 100% damage reduction as opposed to just 50%, right? But the thing is, Zhongli's shield is not unbreakable. Even though it is the strongest shield, if you get hit by a really strong attack, there's a chance that it breaks, and when it does break, you still take 100% of the damage, right? Let's say he was level 90, let's say he'd have 40k HP with a level 9 shield, okay? At 40k HP, his shield is like, let's say 10 to 12,000 HP that it absorbs, right? Which is a very good amount. But if we compare that number, let's say even a 15k shield, which is going to be fine in most situations, right? Let's look at my Dehya. My Dehya does not have a lot of HP. she's rocking 34k, okay? That's not a lot of HP as far as Dehya's go. But if we look at her talents, her E absorbs up to 200% of her max HP. So Dehya, while she's only able to absorb up to 50% of the entire team's damage as opposed to 100% like Zhongli or any shielder while that shield is up, Dehya's entire damage reduction at 34,000 HP goes up to 68,000 HP. So she can absorb up to 68,000 HP in damage and reduce all of that. So if you get hit by a really strong attack, chances are Zhongli's shield can break and then you take full damage. If you get hit by a really strong attack, Dehya can still keep reducing damage as if it was nothing. Now I do agree, however, that in 90% of content, Zhongli's shield is going to be more than enough. And unless there's corrosion involved or anything, like Zhongli will be the more comfortable defensive option. But there is another thing to consider as well, which is my Dehya when she is in this vape team here, for example, and we'll see it later. When she bursts, her swings do over 70k in damage, her final stomp does over 80k in damage. Over the full rotation of her burst, she does several hundreds of thousands of damage, right? Zhongli does not do that much damage. Now the thing is, you can build Zhongli for damage. But if you do build Zhongli for damage, you're gonna get one really nice number with his burst, but his shield is really going to suffer. So if you build Zhongli for full damage, his shield is going to suffer. But if you build Zhongli full HP, full defensive, his damage is going to suffer. The crazy thing about Dehya is, you can build Dehya going balls to the wall with damage, right? I try to squeeze out as much damage as I possibly can. This is pretty low HP for a Dehya. If you build your Dehya for full on damage, you are still going to get 100% of her defensive capability. You're still gonna get that 200% max HP total damage absorption. So even if you had even less HP, even if you only had 30k HP, even less than my Dehya, the chances are very, very slim that you would ever take 60,000 damage in one rotation. So even if you build Dehya for full on damage, she still gets the maximum value out of her defensive utility, and you cannot say the same about Zhongli. While she doesn't do as much damage as Hu Tao, my Dehya does about 70 to 80% the damage of my Hu Tao. She offers a lot more defensive ability. And while she is in most cases not as comfortable as a defensive option as Zhongli is, she offers a lot more damage while still maintaining very good defensive ability. Now people say, well, you can just run Hu Tao and Zhongli and you get better damage and better defense, but that's 2 slots as opposed to 1 slot. And especially as more characters release, I think that difference of having that 1 extra slot is going to be more significant. Previously, prior to Furina, the 2 best Hydro supports were Yelan and Xingqiu, and both of them worked fantastically with Hu Tao, still do. Neither of them work particularly well with Dehya, but now with Furina out, the 2 best Hydro off-field DPS characters are Furina and either Yelan or Xingqiu, depending on the situation. And now at least one of the characters works with Dehya, and works really well with her as well. When we get more characters in the future, I mean, we're gonna get more supports that work with Hu Tao as well, but we're also gonna get more characters that work with Dehya as well. And I'm not saying that Dehya will ever be dealing as much damage as Hu Tao, but the gap might not always be as big as it was when Dehya released, because it is already a little bit smaller. I do think Dehya is a really good role consolidation option, offering a good mix of offense and defense. She's incredibly comfortable to play. I mean, against the Coppelia's boss, we had that thing in the Abyss not too long ago. I could literally just face tank the thing on Dehya, just spamming my burst, just spamming my buttons. I do think Hu Tao is an overall better unit, but I do think people drastically exaggerate how bad Dehya is, because she's still a good 7 out of 10 unit in my opinion, at C2 at least, or if you have really good artifacts on her. Now let's talk about teams. This right here is probably my favorite Dehya team. I mean, the synergy here is through the roof. Obviously, the reason Furina works well with Dehya is because her E attacks are not reliant on any normal attacks like Yelan or Xingshu. Obviously now they're not firing anything because there's no enemy. But Dehya can vape no problem with Farina in the team. Additionally, there's also Mona. Her E has a relatively short uptime, and so does her burst. But the good thing about Dehya is that she can squeeze out all of her burst damage in a really short time. So she can benefit from most of Mona's application and debuffing. Obviously it has Pyro Resonance, which is really good for Dehya. It also has Hydro Resonance, which is also good for Dehya because she scales with HP as well, especially at C2. And then also Dehya and Farina, those two in particular are just really good characters together because, you know, Dehya reduces the incoming damage, and you'd think that's a negative because reduced damage means reduced fan first X, but if you think about it, if your damage is reduced with Dehya's E ability, that means you are now able to take more attacks that would otherwise be too risky. Attacks that you would otherwise have to dodge or shield with Zhongli, for example. And if you either dodge or shield those attacks, you're not generating any fan first stacks because you're not taking any damage. With Dehya, you're taking reduced damage, but because you take reduced damage, you are allowed to take that damage because it's not going to kill you or put you in a dangerous situation. So you do generate fan first stacks because it allows you to take more attacks, to take more damage that would otherwise be too dangerous in many situations. Mona, let's talk a bit about Mona. Mona is another, I mean, the extent to which people underestimate Mona is just staggering. 60% damage bonus against any enemy trapped in her burst. Granted, it's not a long duration, but again, Dehya doesn't need this thing to last a long time because she can squeeze out that damage quickly. The thing that people don't realize, I mean, I guess they're starting to realize it more and more, but Prototype Amber is a broken weapon on Mona. Always has been, but now with Farina out, it especially is. Most of the value of this burst comes from the damage bonus provided, and you get this debuff, the same level of debuff, the same effectiveness, no matter what your stats are. So you might as well run a supportive healing weapon on her, because you still get most of the value of her burst anyway. To the point that I think Prototype Amber R5 is probably her best in slot weapon. I mean, she doesn't work with a lot of characters, but the characters that she does work with, she works really well with. She's great with Raiden, she's great with Navia, she's great with Dehya. Any character that has a short to medium DPS window, she is fantastic with. So this is one of the teams I want to show off. I'll show you some Abyss footage, and we'll talk about how the team functions, and then I'll see you later. Okay, so with all three of these teams, I choose the middle card here, which is the card that least affects the strength of this team. I want to show it as much as possible at a base level without any additional buffs. And so this team and all three teams here managed to finish this boss with at least 9 minutes or more remaining, so in under a minute, which is, I think, is a good time. And you can see my Dehya does good damage here, over 70k vape hits with Farina's buff and Mona's debuff as well as Bennett's Q. I'm gonna slow down the footage here in a second to talk about it more in depth, the rotation. I think there are a couple of tweaks that people don't know about to further optimize how well this team performs. Lots of people prefer running Kazuha in this team, but I do think Mona is a more consistent option. So let me slow down the footage for you. So we're starting off with Dehya's E, just so everyone during the rest of the setup phase profits off of the interruption resistance. We do Farina's EQ combo, we do Bennett's Q for the additional damage, and then crucially we do Mona's Q before her E. We want her E to remain in place for as long as possible during Dehya's uptime. And then we go for the waves. We've got the 76k, multiple 38ks. And we just stand there. We do not dodge anything for the most part. That was a dodge right there, but I don't think I did that on purpose to avoid the damage. I mean, we can really just take a beating and just be fine because of that damage reduction. Now I actually make a small mistake here. I mean, this is not a mistake. The E has a long uptime on Farina, so we use it early while we search for whichever the correct target is. And we see it over there, and that's where I do a small error here in the rotation. Because I activate, I think, Mona's Q here actually before I do Bennett's Q, so we do lose a little bit of uptime on Mona's debuff. But even with that mistake, we still managed to clear really quickly. And as you can see, that damage that Dehya provides, it's not as much damage as Hu Tao would be able to do here in that situation. But it's still more than enough, and the comfort is just super nice. Now the next team I want to talk about is this right here. Obviously we know that Dehya works as Burgeon. You can put full EM on Dehya, which I didn't do here by the way. But you can use Dehya as an off-field Burgeon damage dealer, which I'm not doing here. I'm using her as sort of a hybrid character. The idea is that Nahida, if you have 1000 elemental master at least, once you use her elemental burst, is going to buff the active characters EM by 250. Then you have the elemental resonance of Dendro, which during combat gives you a bonus of 80, so that's 330. Then we have Baizu, who on his artifact set grants you another 120 when he triggers an elemental reaction, so we are at 450 elemental mastery already. And then my Dehya by default has like 80 or something. She's gonna have over 500 elemental mastery, most of it for free by the way. So she's going to trigger decent Burgeon damage while she's on the field even, while still doing decent amount of direct damage as well, because we have Farina as a buffer, which works really well. Again, start off with that E, go into Farina, it's pretty much the same. Then we set up Nahida, and then here if you can see that, we just tanked that hit on Baiju without batting an eye. We welcome it in fact, because it just generates Fanfa stacks and Dehya reduces the damage, so it's not even crazy dangerous. But as you can see, yeah, we still do it obviously less damage because we don't have Mona and Bennett to buff Dehya's direct damage. But we still do a decent amount of direct damage with Dehya, in addition to some really nice Burgeon damage with all the EM buffing that goes on in this team. I think overall we clear a little bit slower here on this team than with the Vape team. But that's also, I think, because my Baishu, for example, isn't fully invested in. My Nahida isn't the best invested as well. Right, the last of my 3 favorite teams that I want to show off right here is this one, with Navia, the new character. Navia works exceptionally well as a burst DPS character. You put her on the field, you do this. You switch to Dehya, you do her burst. You switch back to Navia, more crystal shots are generated at that point. You did this again, right? If you haven't farmed the new artifact set yet, but you do have Golden Troop set pieces, they are really good in this team because you're not using Navia as an on-field attacker much at all, and you pretty much always have the full elemental skill damage uptime there, which is really nice. So Dehya and Navia combined have a short enough damage rotation that they both profit off of Farina's damage bonus, which is really nice. Jean right here is really good because she generates an insane amount of Fanfa stacks for Farina pretty quickly. The only downside is that if you initiate a fight, let's say in the Spiral Abyss, you do this on Farina, right? You go on Jean. If you press your heal right now, it's not gonna generate a lot of stacks because obviously it's not gonna heal if you're at nearly full HP. The way I typically play this is with Farina just in front of Navia, just so that her E can drain a little bit of HP before I get to Jean's heal. So we have at least a couple of Fanfa stacks. But once that second rotation comes around, that's when Jean's heal is really gonna boost your damage. In this team, honestly, Jean, you can either run, I don't even know which one I have currently. Yeah, you can run Viridescent Venerer, because it's gonna swirl, there we go, Farina's damage. But you can honestly also run Noblesse, which is a more comfortable option, because the thing with Noblesse, yeah, it's not gonna help Farina, but it does help both Dehya and Navia. And the good thing is it has 12-second uptime, I believe it is, which is again enough to cover the whole DPS window between Dehya and Navia. So that's a really strong team, and I'll show off this one next. Okay, so there's a lot going on with this rotation. Kind of a lot of things happening all at once. I can probably talk about that once we slow down the footage, but as you can see here, we go into Navia just for that E. Make sure to absorb like whatever crystallized shards are on the ground with that slide holdy. Go into Dehya, go into Navia again. We get the full Golden Troop effect because we're less than 2 seconds on the field with Navia by the time we hit that E. And I think this team actually clears the fastest out of all 3 of them. Not by a whole lot, but it is nice. The great thing about Navia is really the different types in which you can play her. So here's the slowed down run. We start the same way as with the other 2 teams. Get that comfort up, get Farina's damage up. Then we go into Navia's Q to start generating those crystals. We do heal a little bit, but it doesn't generate a lot of fanfare stacks because at this point we haven't taken a lot of damage. Then we go into Navia, go for a nice 147k. And again, Navia's and Dehya's combined damage window is short enough to profit of the entire burst duration of Farina. We go into Navia again, 223k, and just now, after that final E hit on Navia, the burst on Farina's run out. And then we basically set up the Q on Navia and the E on Farina while we search for the correct opponent. There it is. We set up our comfort zone again. It is circle impact, but it's a really big field, so it is, you know, the fact that it's an area of effect and that it has its limits is hardly ever an issue, because it is a fairly large field. And there we go. That is pretty much GG. As you can see, even without Mona, even without Bennett, Dehya still hits pretty hard, 58k there. So again, looking at these teams here, these are my 3 favorite Dehya teams. And if you look at them, I do have to admit they're all sort of premium teams. I mean, this is all 5 stars. This is all 5 stars. This is almost all 5 stars, although Bennett might as well be a 5-star, let's be honest. But honestly, like, even if you don't have all of these 5 stars, and even if you don't have Farina, there are other options. There is this team right here. Zhangling is a free-to-play character. You can get Bennett relatively easy if you save up. You can, I think you can buy him off the Paimon shop. These 2 are a really strong combo, and then Kazuha is the best 4th slot, but you can run Sucrose here instead. It works almost as well. People tend to say that, well, Hu Tao is just better in this slot, and Zhangling and Bennett and Kazuha or Sucrose, they just carry Dehya, which is, I mean, yeah, they do high amounts of damage, and it almost doesn't matter what character you run in here, but you might as well run a comfort option. I mean, Dehya still does good amounts of damage in this team as well, and again, she just provides so much comfort, right? If you compare her to Yoimiya, like, she isn't a single target damage dealer. She probably has better AoE or more easy to use AoE than Hu Tao as well, you know? She doesn't have a tricky playstyle that requires some learning. You just mash your button. You have that interruption resistance, you have that damage reduction, which is especially nice with only Bennett as the healer on the team. Again, I don't want to harp on Hu Tao too much. I'm just comparing them because they're being compared a lot. And then, you know, I personally don't like to do it because I like using Dehya on the team, but you can also run her as an off-field Birchin character with on-field drivers like Nivelette and Nahida, or Kokomi and Nahida. Works perfectly fine. It is true that if you want to get the max value with Dehya as an on-field driver in like a Vape team or like this hybrid Virgin team, will probably require more premium units. there are still other team options available. But yeah, that's it for my rant about Dehya and how I think that she's a good unit and how I think she is underrated. She's not great, but she is good, and I do think she has potential to become even better. Maybe even tomorrow with Chef Rose. We'll see how that team goes. I'll definitely pull on the banners. I'll see how well they work together. The good thing with Dehya's burst is honestly that she does have... she travels quite a bit of distance, similar to Raiden. She sort of snaps onto the enemies as she attacks. So she's not the worst character to use with Overload, at the very least. But yeah, that's it, gamers. I'll see you again maybe another time. Have a good one.